Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Thank you so much for joining me today to discover the truth beneath the surface. And today promises to go deep beneath the surface as I once again have the high honor of welcoming Gene Decode to the show for a follow-up interview. And what I'm hoping will happen, of course, is if Gene is willing, of course, is that Gene will become a regular guest so we can have the opportunity to continue to learn from him into the future. Because for most people, as the Great Awakening unfolds, it's going to be quite the learning process for myself included. And as information is disclosed, which is already happening, of course, and all of that's just really, really exciting. And to be able to get Gene's take on that directly is just such an honor. But before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you in the audience for stopping by to listen, of course, and to offer both Gene and myself your consciousness and your willingness to explore these issues. So please take a moment to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and please do share the links everywhere so we can get this incredible information to a wider audience. All right, so thank you, and God bless each and every one of you. So, okay, let's get into it. So first of all, thank you, Gene, for blessing us with your willingness to come back on the show. How have you been?
I've been doing okay.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much. And so the last time that we spoke, we got into a wide range of topics, and I received, as I'm sure you did, quite a bit of positive feedback, particularly with regard to the clarity you provided both on the vaccine issue, as well as the question of timing as it relates to the alliance taking, I guess you could say, overt action. So let's begin there if we could. So the last time that we spoke, you had indicated that the alliance was waiting for a certain percentage of the public to awaken and to demand action before making their move. And then you also said that in the United States and Canada, we were only at roughly 20% of people who were awake, and that you also mentioned that outside the United States and Canada, it's a much, much higher number, well over 50%. So I wanted to ask first, what percentage are they waiting for in the US and Canada? I mean, I have to assume it's at least 50%. Where are we now in terms of public awakening? I mean, we're getting closer to that percentage.
Yeah, the vax is actually, the big shot is actually making people wake up to the truth of what's going on. Now you have American frontline doctors, which is over 20 doctors like Dr. Mercola and Dr. Northrup, Dr. Tenpenny, that are putting out the truth about what's in this and how it's doing things, and that's waking people up. And the other things going with the gas prices going up, which is causing everything to go up, because of course you have to ship things, and a lot of the shipping is done by use of fuel. So I mean, a lot of trucking and that, and so that's causing the price of lumber, and that causes the price of houses, and food and all of that to go up. So people are waking up because he shut the pipeline down, all of that causes everything to go up. And so that's, people are going, why'd he do that? And Trump opened that up and opened this up, and he's shutting everything down. What does that have to do with what's going on? It's like I was watching on Facebook an amazing young lady who was saying, don't push your fears on me, which is how I feel. If you, I don't, I'm going to rely on my immune system, and I don't feel I want to be a lab rat. And so if you want to get this, then go ahead. And then if you want to wear a face diaper, then go ahead, but don't force your fears and your choices on me. You say my body, my decision, but then you say I have to do this. I don't agree. So if you don't like how I want to be, then stay 6 feet away. And if you believe your stuff works, then why do I have to do it? If it's working for you and keeping you safe, then what difference does it make what I do? You're already safe in your understanding of things with this. You've had this. I had the same thing happen. I went on vacation to Florida. I've actually had it in January of 2019, and then I didn't have a face diaper on, and the person goes, was saying, I go, I've already had it. And they go, yeah, but not everybody has. That's like a ridiculous statement. If you know how viruses work, if I've had it, it means I'm not infectious now. I mean, there are a few where you're like typhoid and things like that, like typhoid Mary, where you're infectious, but you don't show it and get it yourself. That's not the case with this. So if I've had it, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to transmit it. So that, and then if you believe your stuff's working, again, even if I were, then what's the point? So, we're continuing on, and this kind of thing is waking more and more people up. So, the percentages are going to go up, and the alliance is making steps. They have put in temporarily a president for the Republic of Canada, a temporary constitution until it can be voted. They can tell people what's going on there, and then at the same time put forth, and ratify a constitution and put forth a vote for people to vote in who they have. But they've taken out little Castro, and they have this Asian, Native American, various sundry type ethnicities woman, which is beautiful because, you have somebody who's very representative of a mixed population like you have there, that's saying, and being very strong and saying things that are very powerful for the people of Canada now. So their republic's starting to, they're starting to have a republic in actuality and get a return system, and that's waking people up as well. And the US is looking at people in the US, that's helping to wake people up too, so that they can do the same thing with Trump and our republic here.
Okay, so your feeling is that are we nearing that magical percentage? I mean, are you aware if there is a percentage, what the number is, or is it really not that specific?
Where there is a percentage, what it is that they're looking at and how they're ascertaining it, I'm not privy to.
I see. Okay, so there are so many different lies to be revealed and so many different possibilities of how this information is going to come out. But I'm curious, I mean, you already touched upon a couple of different events that you believe have red-pilled the public so far. But I'm curious, what do you think is going to be the real tipping point, massive public red pill that we've all been waiting for, all of us patriots who are just sitting here and wondering when that big event is going to come along and really drive that awakening home for so many people, even those people who are sort of on the fence. I'm curious, do you think it's going to be the election audits? Do you think it's going to be revelations about COVID? Will it be something entirely different, unexpected? What's your take on that?
It could be the election audits, but I know how God works. Often you have a Red Sea moment. So it could be a Red Sea moment with God, He could move his infinitely powerful hand and give us something that really wakes up the entire world. Yes. Like the cabal does things that woke up people pretty massively. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Like 911 made it pretty obvious, but Notre Dame, and I did that on a recent show explaining Notre Dame, and people didn't wake up to that at all, although there was a lot of incongruities, inconsistencies, and why and what and how come it was treated that way. And that was for the alliance of all in this war. That's the biggest thing that they've stopped and were able to do, was to burn Notre Dame 4 days prior to when the cabal needed it to be burned. They wanted that burned with the people inside it, not nobody in there. So, and they had cloned the body of Christ, and we're going to bring Lucifer up into that body so they could have the Antichrist. And the alliance, Japanese part of the alliance, found out, and so they were able to burn it 4 days soon. That's why you had Big Mike on the river instead of doing, a ritual for in the church or underneath it, actually. And so that was huge. And one fire truck showed up. Nobody's catching on to this. It's like this would seem rather odd.
Now, at that point in time when that happened, though, that wasn't a pantomime or part of the movie. Things were very much fluid in terms of the situation, because from what I recall, you had said that they were trying to essentially make a portal large enough for Lucifer to come through, and that they had a very short window, and the alliance basically screwed up their entire plan. Is that? Yes,
and if people go back and watch, and I did that on another interview where I went through Pet Goat 2, And Trump, or excuse me, Bush, when 9/11 happened, was reading My Pet Goat with a bunch of school children, and they were doing a satanic incantation. They had the kids do rapid spelling over and over, like plane, strike, must, hit, steal, cut, or not plane, but kite, and all of these, because it wasn't actually a plane. And so they were doing this incantation. And so if you go and take Pet Goat 2, the cartoon that came out in 2013, and they're showing Notre Dame in that coming down, bringing forth the Antichrist. And so it's showing how they condition us. That's Tavistock Institute technology and mind control, where they precondition us in our thoughts, feelings, and imagination, bring forth what they want to have happen. And so that was derailed, and that's very powerful. But as far as, and then we had the Ever Given situation, in which they were going to have those weapons shipped of mass destruction to the Holy Land, and to start a nuclear war, like Albert Pike had written, to get us into a one world government, a one world order, to have weapons start in Turkey, nuclear weapons in Turkey, Israel, and many other countries that would spread off first across the Middle East and around the world. And so there are timelines where that has occurred, and they did not find out about that on the Ever Given, and it was not run aground, and all those weapons weren't stopped. So those timelines, because you have to have all choices do happen. It's how quantum works. So, and God allows for every choice so that people can experience what they need to experience and they choose to experience. So all choices are allowed, and that's why in the Bible originally you had those primary choices outlined. The Cabal took out the Book of Sarah and the Book of Maps and Keys and 40 books of Ezra and the Book of Enoch and all of these out of the Bible, so we wouldn't know the timelines of the Great Awakening. And we would only focus on the Book of Revelations, which is their timeline of Armageddon and the Antichrist and all of that stuff. So we're not on that, obviously, because Armageddon isn't going on, which is going on over there. And the Antichrist isn't here, because that choice has already been done over there last year with the burning of Notre Dame on Easter Eve instead of 4 days too soon. So those things weren't stopped, and they already have all that taking place.
So when you say that this, so I can understand on the timelines, because I'm still learning about this concept. So when you say that over there, for example, the Armageddon situation with all of the weapons on board the Ever Given, we're not living that timeline because we made a different choice. But you said that is happening over there. Can you explain what you mean by over there, and why is it that our consciousness or our conscious mind seems only to follow? It seems to us as if there's only one timeline, and yet there are so many others. So I'm just curious if you could break that down a little bit.
As you get more advanced, you can actually experience other choices you have actually made and other use. A good movie to watch would be Sliding Doors, in which a woman is passing by herself because she made at a certain point a different choice. So she didn't meet a guy.
Oh, yes, I did see that. I remember that movie. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. So it's exactly like that, where your choices predelect. In that case, it was for her. But there are choices like learning and deciding for the Alliance to stop the Ever Given, or to stop and change the date of Notre Dame, and those things that affect the masses and affect the people as a whole. And those come about, again, by people waking up and making choices. So there's more people awake. So there's an alliance to do that. So it is how we think and feel and make choices that delineate what your choice, the timeline and the overall choices of the masses as a whole. And it's a somersault effect where one choice leads to one choice, and you interact with one person or two people, and they interact on and on and on. That's why the Alliance is looking for a certain amount, so that at a certain point you can go towards this direction. And they're very familiar with this because the Cabal has been looking and doing this for quite a long time. If you read the Montauk series by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon, in that they went back in time and eradicated somebody's grandfather before he had a son, so the son wouldn't be in their way, and for what they wanted to do. And then they came back and the person was still there. So they found out through von Neumann's mathematics that timelines work as a manifold of 8 timelines per manifold. So you have to change a manifold, or to create a new manifold, you have to change that event, stop that event on all 8 lines of a manifold, so that manifold comes into being. So they did that, and they've been manipulating timelines for quite a while, but they found out later on that time is plastic, and it tries to heal itself back to choices that were made at the time, not by you feeding back in time. And so that created a lot of what we know as the Mandela effect, where time was jumping all over the place, and non-terrestrials came and told the cabal to stop doing that, because it's having ripples across, what we do here doesn't just stay here, it moves out across everywhere. It's a ripple that you drop a rock in a lake, the ripple goes all the way across the lake. It doesn't stop in the local area. So it was affecting many, 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 planets and galaxies, and rippling out across creation. There were groups came here and go, stop that. You're messing up everything.
Now, was that the NAAs that were telling them to stop it, their allies, or was it other groups?
Both. All sides were coming and telling them, you got to stop this. Some of the NAAs don't care, so they were saying, yeah, keep going. But even some of the NAAs were going, that are more advanced and more understanding how the ripple goes out in the long term. We're telling them, you got to stop what you're doing. You're making a really mess of things, and it's really creating a lot of discontinuities within all the timelines.
Wow, that's fast. This is fascinating. So, okay, so this is a really nice segue. Another issue I wanted to ask you about is UFO and non-terrestrial disclosure. As I'm sure you've noticed, the MSM is really ramping up coverage of this issue ahead of what I believe is I think it's next month, the government's supposed to come out with an official report of disclosure on UFOs. So my first question related to this topic is first of all, is the mainstream media operating autonomously at this point, or is it essentially under alliance control? Wanted to sort of set the table with that
still
first.
Kind of quite a bit under, it's kind of half and half. It's a lot still under cabal control.
Okay. So why so much attention all of a sudden? I mean, some are questioning if this is a diversion tactic to distract from the election audits or the more imminent revelations about COVID. Other people are wondering if this is a part of white hat disclosure. Other people I've heard are skeptical that this could be a hint of a forthcoming false flag, non-terrestrial invasion. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is an alliance. The people who are saying that that's going to happen, again, if you look at the disclosure, which you do not see that in the book of Revelations. You do not see that anywhere else. I mean, yeah, you have some movies with that, but it's not a worldwide. I mean, you do have 4th of July and some of those movies where they were planning on it, but that is not in the works anymore. And they've lost the Blue Beam capacity, Project Blue Beam, because they lost the satellites back in 2017. So they don't have the capacity to do that now.
That's good to know.
Disclosure is an alliance move, and they were going to do it, but much, much earlier. But the cabal burnt Paradise, in California down, which was a non-terrestrial group that were willing to come forward, that were already here. And there are other groups here. So the space program was created as a soft disclosure, working towards a full-out disclosure. And that's the alliance plan from the beginning, because if you reveal and show people that there are other groups and have been here for thousands of years, plus groups helping on both sides of this coin from, definitely before the beginning of World War II with Hitler and those groups, as well as with the Allies. And there were groups that approached Eisenhower, and there were, several different groups that did. And you show these events and things that are tied in, it's going to wake people up. It's going to be something that will really wake up people. Plus, it'll allow them to get rid of the petro system, the petrodollar and all that, because you reveal the patents which are already been disclosed and opened of Salvatore Pais. They use Salvatore Pais to disclose the TR3 type units that are anti-grav with free energy devices, and those patents are operational and free, meaning that the blueprints you're looking in that patent are actually an operational vehicle. And free means that there's no gratuities needed. If you want to go develop it, you don't have to pay the owner of the patent some type of gratuity or anything. So that's already out there too. So that would literally, free energy, you're going to really change the world. That's the big thing for disclosure, is the idea to change the death grip of the cabal through fossil fuel. So if you get rid of any need at all for fossil fuel, then you get rid of that death grip completely. You get free energy, not only with that, but with the other non-terrestrial things like printers that can print out raw materials like gold or silver or copper or whatever, even simple, things that are some, small organic things that aren't too complicated, they can print that out. So that then reduces and removes the necessity to mine the earth and to strip mine and do all the damage we're doing to the environment. And free energy, of course, you get rid of the need for biomass fuel systems, big, that burn down tons of forests. They tear them down to burn them to provide energy. You get rid of all of that, it makes a huge difference in not only the economy of the world, but the ecology of the world.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, what if the Anunnaki had those printers to print gold way back when they came here to begin with? What a different situation we'd be in.
Well, in that case, it doesn't work because gold that is natural instead of printed, all gold comes about through transmutation of quartz. So as quartz is bombarded by particles, it creates the atoms to get in their nucleus more protons and change in silicon changes into gold. That's why if you look at retilated quartz crystal, that has gold strands to it, that's what's going on. That's how that got in there. So silicon being the second most abundant element on the earth, meaning gold is the third. In actuality, they make it look like it's rare because they hoard it beyond comprehension, and that's been removed now from the Vatican Dome and from under the Tower of London and the Crown Corporation's reserves underneath the Queen's residence and all of that. So now with the printing, if you print gold, it doesn't have the energy signature where and when it formed. And that natural where and when you make it monatomic, has different type of principles to it. So when monatomic means you take two of the dimensions into the etheric realm or the quantum realm, so it's pulling energy directly from that realm. And because of it formed naturally, when it's tied to that, it's pulling a natural kind of energy outward instead of an older energy that's tied to a place and time, which is why they were actually gathering it all in the Vatican Dome, was to have technology, excuse me, that would activate. And because that gold had been gathered from all over the earth, it would control the ley lines of the earth. So they could control all of the mines and the earth and technologies and animals and everything else. But that was why the Anunnaki came to get the gold from the earth, because it has that unique signatures from all over the earth. They're getting it from certain areas, and they were actually mining in specific areas for that reason. And that's why they needed to reseed their planet with that rather than something out of a printer.
So whatever they can print, the gold that they can print out of these printers would not have had the same effect. So it wouldn't have made a difference ultimately. Can you just explain what you mean by the gold recedes the atmosphere? Because you had said, I've heard you talk about that's the real value behind gold. It has nothing really so much to do with money or jewelry or anything like that. It really has to do with its electromagnetic capacity. So could you talk about how that works a little bit?
More than electromagnetic, it's its quantum energy state. So if you look at gold that came from Thailand, for example, it's very, very red. It's much more red and soft than gold that comes from the American continent, which is much yellower, and actually has its strength is actually more. It's not as soft, and it has a greater strength, although it doesn't have the ability ductility where it can be bent back and forth without breaking as much. So if it's exactly the same element, then how come it would have different properties? Because of where and when it forms. So the quantum signature of where something and when something forms is absolutely unique. That's why the quantum financial system works on that, because when you print even a gold coin from the vat of gold, that every coin coming out of, is printed out is different than the coin before it. Even if it's only a tenth of a second earlier, the earth has moved slightly. You're not in the same moment.
Wow.
So
That's
the quantum
fascinating.
signature is different. So then it's, picks up the energy and the energy structure of the where and when of it. And so they were wanting that where and when, especially the where, but the when also, to control the timelines and to control those locations.
I see. So the gold actually would give them the ability to control timelines and to actually control certain domains and certain locations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I'm glad I asked that question. Okay, so on the topic of non-terrestrials, you're considered to be a top expert. And of course, for most people, this is an area where they know very little. But I also know that more and more people are curious, if not anxious, to understand who or what is out there, first of all, and what is out there that's of most immediate concern to us, whether friend or foe. So could you give us, maybe the audience, just a basic explanation of the different players on both sides, who are our friends and who are our enemies in this galactic struggle?
So I've laid quite a bit of the negative types out on the Blessed to Teach Unleashed deep backstage, where I did quite a few decodes. So the primary negatives, starting with Hitler, you had the Zedi reticuli, the short grays, and you also had the Solipsi ray, which are the taller grays. Sign with Hitler, and also to give them technology in exchange for being able to abduct a certain amount of people to experiment on and get the harvest genetics that they need to initiate their species, because they had been cloning for so long without keeping the original, that they had genetic fading. And then you also had the Alpha Draco, and that was a big part of their technology. And also the primary thing they did for that species was to get property on the moon, because it's all spoken for up there. So they got location on the moon to be able to build a base to be able to step off world from. And that it was originally built like a swastika. And then after the war, after the lease ran out, by that time, after we had lost World War II and the treaty, first the conditional treaty of 1947 with paperclip and all that, and then the unconditional one in 1952, the Nazis were completely running the US. That's why you see the fasci on the floor of Congress and a fascist government, and property being fee simple, or a fief that you have to pay tax, in other words, or gratuity to the king, every year, or the head of the Nazi, each year collects that for that local area that goes to the top, etc. So you had that system. That's actually what the Cold War was about, was not between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was between the Nazis that ran the United States and the black nobility, the ancient blue blood black nobility that ran the Soviet and set up the Soviet Union. And when they reached kind of an uneasy truce, that allowed them to bring the Berlin Wall down and to start working together into, controlling humanity and the world and deciding, okay, we get this part and you get that part kind of thing. And then the Majestic 12 at the end of the war were then taken over and absconded by the Nazis, such that, they killed Forrestal and a few other people, and then started working with the Greys. They had Eisenhower was kind of forced, and they kind of overrode him to get that treaty. He was going to make a treaty with the Blues, which are a positive group, but part of the requirement that they had were for the world powers to nuclearly disarm, and the world powers just coming out of the war weren't about to do that. So unfortunately that didn't happen, and so we would have had a lot of technology in a peaceful world and a unified world of peace with freedom, not peace with no freedom at all. It would have been a true government in which everybody would be living in a very high level of technology and a very high free amount of freedoms, right to bear arms, rights to living well in good jobs where you don't have to work like a slave, literally, and just to make the ends meet. Most people in that future have had that happen, and on the futures where that did happen are essentially millionaires, the world's millionaires, because if you were to take all of and redistribute the wealth equitably throughout all of the people of the world, if you look at the Vatican Dome, that's $34.7 quintillion of gold. That's a massive amount of gold. If you were to redistribute the wealth of that to the entire world, I mean, everybody on earth could be a millionaire. So that's what they've been doing, is they've been living in an opulence we can't even understand. It's beyond and a technology that's so far beyond what we know, that there's things and technologies they have that people have never even heard of. And when some of these I found out about them, I'm like, what? Who would even think of doing some of the things they do? Some of them are so horrific. I'm like, wow, you having a sick, disturbed, 18-1 said, these people are sick, doesn't even go into it. It's depraved beyond comprehension, some of the technologies and things they do.
I'm wondering if we're going to ever find out the full scope of that, or whether or not some of that's going to be withheld from the public. I've heard different people offer different opinions on that. What do you think? Do you think we're going to get the whole truth, or do you think it's going to be somewhat
people are putting
redacted?
A lot of this out that have been in the programs, like my lab programs and things like Super Soldier Talk with James Rink is going into a lot of it. FISIG, which I was on the guest on there twice, which is capital FESIG. And they're going into some of these technologies and stuff, and they outlined the various space programs on there with Johan, who's, both him and James Rink have been in the programs, James for an incredible length of time, way more than people would think a person could be in a program, because they kept age regressing him over and over and over and over. And he was, controlled and part of the Montauk and the Boys in Brazil kind of stuff, and super soldier stuff, and all of that other, depraved kind of stuff that the cabal does. He was part of that and had gone through those tortures and all of that kind of stuff. So he puts out some of what it is, some he doesn't, but you can tell by his demeanor and things. And I've talked to him privately, and you start getting off, he doesn't want to talk about it. It's so horrific. It's just too many bad memories. So, it's like 18-1 said that if we were to learn everything, most people would wind up in a hospital, mental hospital, because it would overwhelm us. It's so sick and depraved.
Yeah, just having
will come out.
Yeah, just having knowledge of some of the things that are out there, and not even having seen them myself, just having knowledge of them haunts me. So I can only imagine. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, on the topic of NTs, I just wanted to, because you did mention the Blues in relation to Eisenhower, and sort of a missed window we had there to make a better treaty. What other NTs are helping us right now?
For the positive groups now, with the alliance as it stands now, the 18-1 alliance and that with Trump and all of that, there's the Arcturians and the positive Palladian group, and then a lot of other factions of blues again, and all of those that are really working now to help humanity, throw off the chains of the cabal, and humanity as a whole needs to ask for that, because if you watch Elena Danaan, and she explains that with her interview with Dr. Michael Sala, where they have a non-interference. The positive groups do non-interference, but they're willing to help if, because their requirements are that the species is spacefaring, which we are, and unified planet-wide. We can't unify because of this negative interference from thousands of years. So if the governments of the world being, as we can see now, not being who we put in there anyway. So they're this negative groups that are putting in their puppets. So in a situation like that, if, they do interfere, if the people as a mass will ask for the intervention of the positive groups, that we want to have our rights, that we were created by Source, as they call the God, for me, God, that created all things, which of course is Source. And a lot of the negative terrestrial groups look at that as a feminine, like the Holy Spirit kind of thing. For Jewish people is also a feminine, and I do concur with that. It's part of the Trinity, the sacred Trinity. But the positive groups will interfere if humanity as a whole were to ask for interference, so that they could get out under and say, we don't want to be slaves anymore. The problem is that a lot of the majority of humans on Earth have a slave mentality, where we want safety over freedom. It's like the founding father said, if you're willing to give up your freedoms for safety, you wind up with neither. And so we need to understand that we have to stand up for ourselves and stop wanting a free lunch. Every time you get a free lunch, you wind up being lunch. So we need to stand up and to take responsibility for what we think, say, and do, and especially for the children, so that our children and our grandchildren down, forever, aren't ever in this situation again. Because if we don't stop it here, where it can head to is a world in which there's essentially no freedom at all. You don't even have a name or any choices at all. You're just told absolutely every minute of every day what you can and can't do, and you're not even allowed to talk, or think. There's even thought crimes, and they monitor your thoughts. I mean, that's part of what the jab is about, is to get that nanodust so they first can track you with the web, which is now going on. There's a guy in Russia that hacked the dark web and actually saw that, that it is doing that. And they can then, as that assembles, through it and gets throughout your entire body. It takes a little time. That's why if you've gotten the jab, you can't get an MRI for the first 4 weeks, because it can blow the machine, and you peg EMF meters and things, because you're such a huge field of energy and so as it distributes evenly throughout the body, then they can actually hijack you. And so that's part of their plan as well, and to upload everybody into the Internet of Things, so that they can manipulate and control everything. And we need to stand up and say, we're not part of that, and not agreeing. And you can see there's quite a few people in U.S. Marines, a lot of them have refused to take it. A lot of military people are wide awake and saying, I don't want that. I'm not going to do that. And, there's a lot of other people saying the same thing. But for the human race as a whole to stand up and ask for the help and say, we will be responsible for ourselves and work and do the work. And if you will give us the tools and the help to throw off this cabal and to throw off these negative groups and get them out of here. And without their assistance, we've had it to a small degree that they can do without that request. They have done things because of the intervention of the negative terrestrials to balance it out, so that we're not locked down yet.
Okay, so they're already doing things to balance out what the negative agendas are doing. So they are helping us militarily, but in terms of taking it to the next level, we have to collectively stand up. And I think that I'm imagining that ties back into the percentage we were talking about earlier, when that certain percentage of folks has woken up and gotten to the point where they're saying, hey, we're ready to be sovereign beings, and we don't want to be controlled. We don't want to be slaves.
Exactly. And on backstage on Blessed to Teach last Saturday, we did a envisioning in which we envisioned and asked for that help. So, the more people that go there and do that, or get groups of people together and envision that and say, we're ready and we want help to have a positive, free life in which we have, what the jobs we work are our choice, where we work in something we love to do, and we make all of what we make minus a very small percentage, like 14% only, which is part of NASARA, goes to help, build roads and that kind of thing, and infrastructure and all of that. And the rest comes to us because we did the work. And that's, people will say tax isn't that high. Actually, well over 80%, 87% of what people make in the US is taxed. Because if you look at the sales tax and the property tax, and fuel tax, and everything's got layers and layers of taxation. So you're the American people, and it's worse most other places, like in England, it's like way higher. It's almost around 93 to 97%, depending on your location in England, the percentage of how much they make and how much they actually pocket out of that. Australia is the same way.
I know people find out where that money's going.
Yeah, they've really realized where that money is going and what they're doing with that money. People ask, how could they build? And I've had people say the dumps are impossible. How could they have the income to build those? You're talking billions of dollars per unit, per dump. How do they have the money? Because we're being taxed out of our minds, and we don't even, literally out of our minds, because we don't even know how much of our income is actually not going to us, it's going to them through this tax and that tax, tax on tax on tax. You look at when you buy a home, and you get it's a lie. Say you get a loan and it's 5% mortgage. It's not 5%. It's compound. The interest is compounded on itself over and over and over. So for a 30-year loan, if you bought $1 million property, you bought that property 30 times. You paid $30 million by the time you get done. It's ridiculous. So, they're talking, when I say, taxation on your income, it's not on income, it's on sales of product. So if you bought something that's a non-essential, that's new, you wouldn't even pay on a used home if you bought it. If you bought a new home, then you pay that 14%. One time you sold it, you wouldn't pay it. So you don't have all this compounding. You get a loan to buy a house. It's flat. You pay it, it's averaged out. It's looked at, you buy $1 million home, you look at the loan, say it's 10% or 14%. It's 14% on the whole, exactly at that moment. And they divide that up through the payments for 30 years. They don't, and that's not, average. Okay, this payment on the interest on that, and it's not compounding. There's no compounding interest. It's a flat one-time calculation that's then divided out through all the payments. So you don't wind up paying interest on interest on interest on interest. And that's the cabal trick, is it makes it look like you're getting for a very small amount. But if you look at how much you pay over the life of the loan, it's more than way over 100% of what you borrowed. So it's ludicrous, and that's what they're saying to get rid of, and that's what we need to ask for, because you do need still, the governments do need to have money to do the infrastructure to keep it up and running, and you can see again, even with what they're getting, they don't really use it much for that, because in the US the roads look like a third world country. You got potholes and the bridges are old, and everything is antiquated. It's not being, you look at our power grid, it's antiquated. It's would be very easy to take down because it's ancient and it doesn't have much backup. It doesn't have each station autonomous if it needs to be, where if one power plant goes down, it doesn't wind up taking down the entire East Coast or the entire US. It could, right now, if you knew what you're doing, you could actually, like you saw in the Independence, or in what was it, Independence Day, I think it was the one with Bruce Willis, I can't remember right now, but they call it a fire cell, and they wind up taking the power down all over the country if they want. So, I mean, if somebody knew what they're doing.
Armageddon?
What's that?
Was it Armageddon, the Bruce Willis movie?
No, it's one where a young man is saying it's a fire cell, and this guy hacked into the system, and he's shutting down not just the power, but all kinds of things are connected to the internet, and they're not able to stand alone on their own. They're all interconnected, and there's not enough security, and there's not enough autonomy within each unit to not take down the entire grid. So it was the same one where at first it was the Nakatomi buildings, and they took out
the Die Hard.
Die Hard, yes, thank you. The Die Hard. It's the last Die Hard movie.
Oh yes, I remember. That was a good one. Is that the one that took place in New York City where they were running around?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I had another follow-up question for you from our first conversation. You recall that I asked, essentially, I don't remember what my exact wording was, but it was the why me, why now question that so many of us ask ourselves in relation to, our consciousness, our awareness and awakening, especially when we inevitably compare ourselves to all those around us. So your response really, really intrigued me, and a lot of my listeners as well, that our souls chose to come to Earth from a much higher density to be in service to our Creator as a sort of away team, as you put it. So my first question in regard to that was, how is it that you know that information? Is it intuitive? Were you told this by God? Because I know that you've said, made it very clear that that you can go to God and talk to God, or is it some other entity? I was just curious, how is it that you are aware of that?
Well, from birth, I've been aware of a lot of things. I've been aware of the Armageddon timeline since birth, of that timeline, and a nuclear conflagration that would have started in 2016 with the election, and then that was supposed to be Hillary, and that actually did happen on the main timelines, and then it was reset. But when I died for 30 minutes in 1992, then I got direct communication for that 30 minutes. I was not in my body, which out of the body when I was immediately over the Milky Way, and then headed into the center of the universe where all the stars orbit around a central star that NASA calls SGRA, or the Sumerians called Shigra. I was, obviously kind of freaked out at first. I'm like 1 minute looking out my eyes, the next minute I'm looking down at the Milky Way. I'm like, what happened? But in that long conversation, God made me aware of that. And then I chose to come back at that time, because I wanted to make a difference here and to get rid of what's going on and to give people the freedom and the choice that their God-given right when their souls were created. So that's how, I know actually, and I know certain specific people, like Trump and those and certain specific people, what their jobs are, who they are, where they came from, what groups, because for me, a lot of people know Starseed. Everybody's a away team, but not everybody in the away team is Starseed. Starseed indicates individuals that came from a high level, a high density, to come back down to third density to help humanity on Earth. But before they went to a high density, they were not human. They would be some other species. So there are many, many, many species of beings that came here to be human now, to be born human, came down from a high density that I am aware of, actually, because in that long conversation with God, I was like, God told me if I want to go back, I'm going back to ground zero. I'm like, they're going to nuke the Earth? He goes, well, that's a choice that could happen, but that's not the reference here. So I was getting the explanation of what that means. In other words, the ground zero, the war that's been coming for time beyond comprehension. It's more than the length of this creation, because God recreates and uncreates over and over and over. It's been coming for creations beyond comprehension, the war between dark and light, or good and evil. So now is the time, and Earth is ground zero for where it either starts to go towards the side of evil, or it goes towards the side of good and light. And it's, God doesn't interfere with that choice. I mean, he allows for that choice. If we want to stand up and take responsibility and learn to be beings of a higher level, where we stand up for ourselves and we take the responsibility to watch over those that cannot do it, and we stop having the ends justify the means. We stay focused in the moment and do what's right in the moment, instead of compromising our morality and our choices for wealth or money or power and greed and all this other stuff, and position and fame and all of that garbage. And we realize that if you're going to be going that way in the long term, you're picking something where you wind up in a hierarchical structure that has absolute power over you, and you have nothing. You wind up literally being food. So to realize that in service to everything, the highest interest of everything everywhere, and obviously as the non-terrestrials call source, for me, God, that in doing so, then all beings are treated with respect and dignity every moment. It's not about, me first. It's about serving others and, doing the right thing that you would do every moment. To always be concerned when you're telling people stuff, you're talking about things, you're doing things. Is this appropriate? It's, is for now. Yeah, we have to have an end in which it's the end of this darkness, but you can't wind up doing that in the manner they do that, or you become them. If you move in dark ways, you wind up becoming darkness itself. So it's learning to throw that off. And so then in all of that back and forth questions and answers with source or God, then I became aware of many, many, many beings for this time when I came back that, that I would need to be interacting with. And he also told me, as the time went further forward, at certain times, he would give me certain information directly, say, okay, go do this, so that I would be kept on course and meet the people I need to meet and talk to the people I need to talk to, that would change the entire world.
Fascinating.
Information for the masses to learn, and there are other people, of course, that have bigger jobs than I do, like Trump and things like that have massive jobs to get rid of the cabal kind of mindset, and to get into a mindset where everybody is honored and respected. In other words, service to God, to the highest interests of all life everywhere.
It's just just so fascinating. So star seeds, I'd never heard that term before. So when you were talking about, just to clarify, so when you were talking about this before, and you were talking about people like yourself, people like Trump, are you a star seed? Is that does that apply to you, or is that apply?
That applies directly to me. And I had realized from almost all my life, like even in my family, I'm nothing like the rest of them. Other than my aunt, my father's oldest sister, nobody was like me. The way I look at things, what I want to do, how I do things, my motivations and their motivations seem totally different. I mean,
I've had the same experience in my life too. That's why I'm so curious about this topic. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
By the time I got to teenage, I'm like, I don't think I'm the same species. I mean, I look like them, but I'm so far different from them. I can't be the same species. I mean, it's literally like, comparing, a lizard to an orangutan. I'm like, there's some massive differences. And then I even started noticing there were some physical, as I got older, and, certain things, you get into the military. Went into the military, and I started noticing I have some physical differences that are unusual, certain things that are very unusual, and that's very rare. in, not many people have it. 1 in 100 million have that. We've never seen anybody that had that, and all of this little odd things, differences. And so, and you see that with people. And I even wound up, being stationed in the Philippines for a while. I had a girlfriend that I had in the Philippines who her hand, if you just see it sitting on the side of a desk where you put your hand with your little finger down usually and your thumbs up, you don't notice it, but she didn't have a little finger and a ring finger. She had 2 middle fingers, 2 index fingers, and a thumb on each side of her hand. I'm like, what are you? That's awesome. You have incredible grip for, she was only like 5 feet tall. She had a super powerful grip. We'll tell you, our grip you like a boa constrictor. I'm like, I like that. That was a pretty cool arm, but I've never seen that before or since. I'm like, you can't be from here. And I learned she wasn't from here, so it was like starseed. Not from here. So, actually it does start, especially now with the energy of the earth going up in the Great Awakening, that original etheric blueprint of how you first were, what species you were originally incarnated as in your first incarnation, that now, because the energy on earth is changing, actually starts to physically change. Certain people's bodies are noticing their bodies changing in certain ways, and that they're getting certain abilities that they didn't have before, and certain anomalies. And so,
you mentioned that, I'm going to ask about that.
Yeah, starseeds are starting to be noticing, changes in their bodies and changes in things they can do, where they can do things that in some cases seem to defy the laws of physics. We're seeing people like that aren't even been modified in, some lab or something by the cabal or the deep state or whatever. They're just modifying.
Wow. So okay. All right. Well, I actually have some other questions along those same lines, but I would really love to know where my spirit came from, if it came from a different place. And apparently, it's a possibility that could be the case. And I just had never imagined that or thought of that as a possibility until you mentioned that. That was a pretty profound moment when you said that.
Yeah, even as far as Earth as we know it is not, parts of it are from the original planet that was the home of the human race. But Earth as we know it is not the home of the human race. So essentially can actually, in a way of looking at it, say that all humans even are starseeds too, because the original planet humans were from is no longer there. It was blown to bits by the cabal. So they went to another planet that was turned into a black hole, and the Milky Way was sucked out through it, like a straw. It was like created the matrix we're in now, the fallen galaxy of the Milky Way. And so, and then the home of the human race, then that was blown up. That was Tiamat. So
Tiamat, yes,
blown into pieces,
Yes, and that's how that's where the Epic of Creation talks about how, in that battle, if I'm remembering correctly, that Marduk slayed Tiamat, cut her in half, and created the heaven and earth. Is that right?
Yeah. And so now we have the earth as we know it now. Marduk being the son of Lucifer. That's, you had a massive battle. It's essentially between the Jovans, the beings on Jupiter, and the beings that were on Mars, and that destruction decimated Mars, and they built the moon to come here to get, and that's why the damage you see on the moon is not actually from meteor impacts while it was in orbit here. It was during the destruction of Tiamat and its voyage here that it got the majority of what we see, all those impact craters.
Okay, so my next question, it was sort of related to the previous question. It was really just about intuition, and in the process of your responding to my other question, you touched upon this, but I've noticed recently that, rather unexpectedly, because I started this podcast just a little bit more than 2 months ago, and it was just kind of on a whim. I just woke up one day and I decided I was going to become part of the noise out there, so to speak. And now I'm finding, rather unexpectedly, that I'm experiencing what almost feels like a force coming over me without the application of my will. And I just start to intuit all these different types of information and possibilities in a way that I've never experienced before. And I'm wondering if this was just an example of what you were referring to when you were just talking about people who are, I guess, on this away team that are activated. Is that aligned with what I just described? Is that similar to what you were talking about?
Yeah, it's similar. It's part of it. What you're experiencing is an awakening, but it's also the reverse of that, because the world's population has now had enough people that have gotten the shot or the test. The test actually is just a smaller amount of what's in the shot. It's the same thing. So over time, it does the same thing. And so people have gotten tested, 3 months ago. It doesn't make a difference if it was a out and out shot or they got tested. The result now, 3 months later, is the same. And so that is transmissible through skin shedding and things like that. So if you're in a closed aircraft, for example, and you have people near you that have been PCR tested 3 months ago or vaxxed recently, or even the longer out, the more they're contagious, not the less. So the longer out you get, the more. So you would be exposed to that, and then that's going to get in you. And that's the design. Part of the design of that is to get control of you. So you're having literally a battle for who you are. You came here knowing certain things, but the cabal is trying to stop that and to literally control everything on Earth, every person on Earth. So there's a battle literally for the independence of who we are, to be independent and free and have our own choices and not be controlled by AI.
Okay, so let's switch gears, if we could, to the Bible. And these questions will also, of course, coincide with the topic of non-terrestrials. Now, in discussing the origins of the cabal and quote unquote mankind, that the Anunnaki, who are or were the rank and file Nephilim, they created a species that was not fully human. And you recall, we also tied this into the vaccine issue, or you had tied that directly into the vaccine issue, which was really breaking news for a lot of people, just totally illuminating. But I wanted to go back to the Garden of Eden, because one of the things that I'm having a difficult time is I'm reading 12th Planet, and I'm learning about all this information and trying to figure out how it coincides with what I've been taught. And I wanted to go back to the Garden of Eden and try to understand, how much of what we've been taught is accurate, and to get a better feel for the timeline of how we actually got here. So my first question on that topic is, like, what happened in the Garden of Eden? Because I've heard different explanations. Some say that Eve was impregnated by the serpent, and that resulted in the birth of Cain. But I wanted you to take us back there and just kind of talk about what happened in the Garden of Eden, and how does it relate to what happened with the creation of mankind and the Anunnaki and all of the timeline? Because I think so many people out there really want to have an understanding of where we came from and what the truth is. So if you could talk about what happened in the garden, then maybe we could go from there.
Yeah, so there was, in regards to Sechin and 12th Planet and all that, he was way up in the cabal. When he would go to Bohemian Grove, even for the cabal, he terrified them. He was so vicious and so ruthless, and he would actually wind up killing some of them in their blood orgies they had at Bohemian Grove. So they were terrified of him. He was way up in the ranks, and he was, his assignment was to take the Sumerian scrolls and translate them favorable to the cabal. The Anunnaki, which are, a group from the Nebru, which is not actually a planet of this solar system. It's the 7th planet of a brown dwarf named Nemesis that has 7 planetary system. They're on the 3 outer planets, which is the Anunnaki, which is Nebru, Helion, and Argoda. It orbits our sun. That system with those 3 planets and its star come into our system. The planets coming into our system, the star kind of stays slightly below the ecliptic. but you can see it as it comes through every 25,920 years, which is what creates the wobble of the Earth. The magnetic fields, opposites attract, but likes repel. So it has the same pole as it goes through, causes the Earth's wobble. And so it passed through back starting in 2016, and then it exited in 2009. The beginning of 2019, it was out of our system completely and won't be back for another 25,900 some years. So they came to get gold. And every time they come through, they need to keep redoing their atmosphere because they're very industrialized. And from when they got taken over by the Draco, they had a nuclear war, so there's a lot of damage to their atmosphere, and they need the gold here to reseed it. And so in that, when they first came long ago, they tried to get humanity to mine gold for them, and it resulted in what that time was known as the Pyramid Wars, in which the big civilization of the Uyghur civilization, which now the Chinese are still torturing the Uyghurs and putting them in camps and harvesting organs and all that kind of thing from them, because that is the cabal up there, and that is their nemesis. That's the original human civilization of the Uyghur at that time, which was in the Gobi Desert, where the Gobi Desert is now, which was a tropical rainforest, along with the Sahara, which was a tropical rainforest as well. And they fought back and actually defeated the negative groups. And in that, though, the negative groups wound up dropping antimatter bombs on the big civilizations, which it caused it to rain sand, getting what we know as the Gobi Desert and the Sahara, changing the entire Earth's atmosphere and creating all kinds, created an ice age actually for quite a long time. And so when they realized they couldn't force humanity to do it, they needed to engineer a worker force that could get the gold, because they still had to have the gold. So the Anunnaki, those from the heavens came, that is the Luciferian group. So they came down, and Adam and Eve she was already expecting the second child from Adam. So if you go to the terminology of the time, she was beguiled by the serpent. In other words, she was taken, mind control by the serpent, so they could take that developing fetus out. And it hadn't started differentiating yet, so it was not to the above 64 cells. And they took it out and erased the genetics and put in the genetics. They couldn't at that time hack the human genome yet. So what they did is they took Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Anunnaki, and Draco and hybridized it so that they could get a species that was intelligent enough to get them the gold, knew what gold was, but would be subservient enough to them and look up to them as God or gods. And so they created mankind, not humanity. Humanity was here many of their trips through before that. So then they created Cain and put it back in her womb, put that changed, genetically altered, hybridized thing back in her, and she brought it to full term and had Cain. That's actually now not the son of Adam. That's the son of this engineering. So then they did that a series of times, 13 times to be precise. You got the 13 bloodlines of Cain. So when he went out of the garden, where did he get a wife from? If it's only him and Adam and Eve now, where does the wife come? Where does his sons get wives from? I mean, it's rather obvious. And he's told to go forth and replenish. That means to do it again. Means do it again. So he's bringing forth the bloodlines of Cain. And, the missing books of the Bible are very clear on this, what happened. Unfortunately, we don't, even the books we have, they have pieces out of it. So this is not clear in that, who's talking to who and who's talking to who when. So even in the Bible, there's slight changes in the spelling of things. For example, with our Constitution, you look at the States was the Constitution for these United States, for America. United States, and it's now of, and it's not these, it's the, and it's not United States with just a capital U and a capital S. It's all in caps, which is an acronym. It's not a word anymore. It's an acronym where each letter stands for something. You have that occurring in the Bible too, where they did, took out pieces and then they changed the lettering such that it went, when they translated it from Aramaic and Greek and etc., they capitalized everything. So that is now referring to a different being. So when you see all in caps, L-O-R-D or G-O-D, it's referring to something else. So he is told to go, Cain is told to go out of the garden. And he said, oh, I'm worried because they'll get me. Who's they? Well, if we're thinking animals, and then he's told that I'll put a mark on your head, on your forehead. What does that mark in the book of Revelations mean? And so he gets a mark and they will not, God, caps, all caps, tells him they will not touch you, for they will know your mind. Whose they will not touch you. I mean, if a mother lioness baby is starving and her baby, she's not lactating and her babies are dying, she's gonna not care. In fact, a smart lion would look at the mark on your head and go, you're of the dark one. You should be food first. You're evil. I'll get rid of you. So that mark is literally the mark of the beast again. It's the mark of the serpent. And so Sechin is saying that they created humanity. They didn't create humanity, they created the cabal, the 13 bloodlines of the cabal. That's mankind, not humanity, not the same species, totally different. But then, of course, he goes out, they get children, they start interbreeding. And that's part of the Sermons on the Mount that were removed. There wasn't just one, there was many Sermons on the Mount. Christ was saying, don't marry mankind and interbreed. So you can see, like, I was feeling in my family, mankind is dominant in the genetics. Humans are recessive. So if you had two 100% human parents, they're only going to have human children. But if you had two mankind, they could have human genetics and have human children and mankind children, because there's been so much intermixing for so long. And so now we're in a situation, that's what Moses was told to go in, and take down Jericho, take down all these places, and take, there's been many people throughout the Bible that have been told to, get rid of the Canaanites, because they are the seed of the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, and all this, those from the heavens that fell, the fallen that fell here and started to try to take over the whole planet again. And so it's this, the bloodlines that were created, the 13 bloodlines are mankind, but that's the most pure of them. But you have layers of people, and even in the Mark Ultra programs, they found out that you can't, if somebody's more than 75% human genetics, the mind wash doesn't hold.